Larry Johansson here, author, speaker, seminar leader, parent, and mentor, whose mission is to engage, encourage, educate, and empower everyone I encounter, especially young people, to embrace excellence and become achievers with character. Today I want to talk about Black History Month, how we celebrate it, the importance of being honest about the implications of Black history for Canadian society, and how to use the true narrative of Black history to create a more just and equal society in Canada for all. As you might be aware, we're in the final week of the celebration of Black History Month here in Canada, and 21 years since the Canadian Parliament designated February as Black History Month. In this month, we acknowledge and celebrate the achievements and contributions of Blacks to Canadian society, and hopefully in the process encourage and motivate younger generations of Black Canadians to follow in the footsteps of their elders. And here I want to acknowledge the Honorable Jean Augustine, the first Black woman elected to the Canadian Parliament in 1993, and all who supported her in getting the federal government in 1995 to agree to her motion to acknowledge February as Black History Month. Now, while I applaud the celebration of Black History Month, I want to point to two disturbing trends in the celebration of Black History Month, which I think we need to address. First, I find the celebration of Black History Month almost a whitewash. And by that I mean that while Black history is a tribute to the resilience and strength of Black people, the role of white people and the institutions they created, beginning with slavery, colonialism, the ideology of racism, and the perpetuation of injustice and anti-Black racism, even today, are hardly or never discussed. White Canadians act as if there never was slavery or racism in Canada. We need to acknowledge that Black history is Canadian history, is also white history. And like the head and tail of a coin, we can't talk about one without the other. We celebrate Black history generally by singling out a few outstanding Black people in the community for their stellar achievement, often with the tacit assumption that nothing stands in the way of anyone who has ambition and works hard. And bourgeois Blacks, with cocktail glasses in hand, often at a gala event thrown to celebrate their esteemed colleague or colleagues, all nod their head and smile, ignoring the fact that the emperor is indeed naked and that all is not well. Second, I've also noticed that attendance at Black History Month events have fallen and continue to do so. There's a glaring absence of ordinary Black people at these events. The people in attendance are generally committed community activists who are usually Black, and local politicians, councillors, mayors, and members of the provincial parliament who are usually white, with occasionally a Black member of parliament or councillor who somehow broke through the barriers to become elected. The event is usually some proclamation acknowledging the contribution of Blacks that have been overlooked in a particular community. A few speeches, a cultural presentation, maybe some drumming, a tribal dance, and everyone goes away feeling good that they have contributed to an understanding of Black history and proof that Canada is a kinder, gentler, multicultural society where little, if any, racism exists. When the month is over, we pack up until the following year. Meanwhile, none of the deep structural issues in the society that negatively impact Blacks are dealt with. And what are these issues? They are higher rates of poverty and unemployment, over-policing and carding of young Black males, the overrepresentation of Black males in the criminal justice system, the underperformance of Black students in schools, the default suspension and expulsion of Black students from schools who can't lawyer up like their white counterparts, the overrepresentation of Black kids as wards of the state, the fragmentation of the Black family, the absence of Black fathers, shadism or intergroup racism, Black on Black violence, and I could go on and on. So while I think it is great that we celebrate February as Black History Month, we need to go further than a proclamation acknowledging that Blacks contribute to Canadian society. We all know that. Or selecting one or two outstanding Black achievers. We need to integrate the study of Black history into the mainstream curriculum and textbooks and bring the discussion of racism and specifically anti-Black racism into the open and all available forums with the intention to address the structural issues that have contributed to the problems in the Black community that I've just enumerated. In this way, Black history becomes not just a tangential, increasingly irrelevant, oh-hum affair, but an integral and vibrant aspect of Canadian society and culture, and contributes to the drafting of just and fair government policy. And the Black history that I'm talking about includes the history and culture of Africa prior to slavery and colonialism, and not just the history of the last 500 years in which Africa was conquered and colonized by European powers, its people enslaved and transported to the Americas, and their subsequent and ongoing struggle for freedom and justice. Sadly, too many young Black Canadians have the mistaken notion that their ancestors were only slaves, a notion that contributes to feelings of inferiority, low self-esteem, and the negative behavioral patterns that we're all too familiar with among Black youth that flow from that negative self-perception. We need to be honest, authentic, and truthful with each other as Canadians. An example of the truth-telling I'm talking about and the most significant Black history event I attended this year was the symposium sponsored by the Jean Augustine Chair in Urban Education at York University on February 17 and 18, which brought scholars, lawyers, community activists, and students to deliberate on the theme, the evolving meaning of Blackness in Canada. They talked about anti-Black racism, the pain that is etched on the Black experience, and the quiet efficiency with which the economy, educational and justice and criminal justice systems discard Black bodies. And while we have become used to the abnormal incarceration of Black males, I was stunned to learn that Black female inmates were one of the fastest growing inmate populations in Canada, stereotyped as defiant, hypersexual, and masculine. And all of this while Canada trumpets to the world the image of a progressive, liberal country, the true North, strong and free, that has become, once again, in the words of one of the panelists, the Underground Railroad of the 21st century, with people risking life and limb to escape what is happening down south. I came away wondering if the meaning of Blackness has truly evolved in Canada, and concluded that it is imperative for all Canadians to rally to make the Charter of Rights and Freedoms a living reality for all Canadians. This brings me to commit to adding my voice in a more public way to the call for social justice and equality in Canada. As a parent, uncle, and mentor of Black kids, I have a deep and vested interest in the transformation of Canadian society, and my commitment is to continue the dialogue on the structural inequalities in Canadian society that marginalize Blacks. As one who is acutely aware of the privilege that whiteness bestows in Canadian society, I've had to walk the razor's edge of letting my son, nieces, nephews, and mentees know that they have to be twice as good to have a shot at the same opportunities as their white Canadian counterparts, while equipping them to be tough and resilient and believing in themselves, despite the overt and covert racism they will encounter as a matter of course as Black Canadians. It's a challenge to strike the balance between telling them the truth of the reality of racism in Canadian society while keeping them motivated and sold on the idea that they can be anything they want to be. That's a challenge that white parents don't have to face, and one that Black parents shouldn't have to either. To this end, Black history will not be a once-a-year event for me, but a dynamic ongoing process here and now that demands engagement, education, empowerment, and enlightenment of both Black and white Canadians if we are to realize the justice and equality for all that Canada says it stands for. And so, I call on all Canadians to make Black History Month a year-long affair, all year long. Thank you.